The morning bell rang across the Galactic Military Academy, and students from dozens of different worlds hurried to their classes. The massive space station orbited a bright blue star, its metal corridors filled with the sounds of alien languages, and the clicking of various types of feet, claws, and tentacles on the polished floors in Classroom 7B. Professor Vex arranged his notes with 4 of his 6 arms, while the other 2 adjusted the holographic display panels. The tall, purple-skinned instructor had taught hunting tactics for over 20 years, but today felt different. Today they would have a special guest. The students filed in, each taking their usual seats. Kaax, the massive Zentari warrior, sat in the back row, where his bulk wouldn't block the view of smaller students. His thick gray skin bore the ritual scars of his people, and his yellow eyes glowed with the pride of a born predator. Next to him sat Zix, whose insect-like appearance often made others uncomfortable. The hive-born student's compound eyes tracked every movement in the room while her forearms took detailed notes. In the middle rows, Lynn adjusted her breathing apparatus. The Void-Touch student's pale blue skin seemed to glow faintly in the classroom light. Her people lived in the cold darkness between stars, and she found the warm, bright environments of most civilized worlds challenging. Despite this, her analytical mind made her one of the best tactical students in the academy. Near the front, Zara nervously groomed her fur. The small Keth scout barely reached the height of most students' shoulders. But her people were known for their incredible speed and agility. Her large ears twitched at every sound, a habit that showed her constant alertness. Professor Vex cleared his throat, gaining the attention of all 37 students. "Today we welcome a new student to our Advanced Hunting Tactics class," he announced. Exchange student from the planet Earth in the Sol system. Excited whispers filled the room. Earth was famous throughout the galaxy as a death world, a planet so dangerous that most species considered it uninhabitable. Stories of its massive predators, violent weather, and toxic atmosphere had become legend among military students. But Professor called out Kaax, his deep voice booming across the classroom. "I thought Deathworlders were supposed to be huge and scary. The stories say they have fangs and claws and can tear through metal with their bare hands." Vex smiled, showing his pointed teeth. "Perhaps our assumptions about Deathworlders need some examination. Please welcome Jake Martinez." The door slid open, and Jake walked into the classroom. The room fell silent as every student stared at the newcomer. Jake stood about average height for a humanoid, maybe a bit shorter than a Zentari, but taller than a Keth. His skin was a light brown color, and he had dark hair that looked like it had been recently cut. His eyes were brown and calm, and he wore the standard academy uniform that fit him normally. This was it. This was the legendary Deathworlder. Jake looked around the room, taking in the various alien faces staring at him. Some looked disappointed, others confused, a few seemed relieved. He raised his hand in a simple wave and said, "Hi everyone, I'm Jake. Nice to meet you all." His voice was pleasant and friendly, with no hint of the growling roar that many students expected from a Deathworld predator. Kaax looked particularly puzzled, as if he had been expecting a challenge to his status as the class's top warrior. "Please take a seat, Jake," Professor Vex said, gesturing to an empty chair near the middle of the room. "We were just about to begin today's lesson on pursuit hunting techniques." Jake nodded and sat down, pulling out a simple notebook and pen. Several students exchanged glances. Most galactic species used digital tablets and neural interfaces for note-taking. The primitive writing tools seemed to confirm their suspicions that humans were technologically backward. Professor Vex activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional forest scene. "Today, we will examine the hunting methods of various apex predators throughout the galaxy. Who can tell me the key advantage of the Altarian Shadowcat?" Lynn raised her hand. "They use active camouflage and can become nearly invisible to most. Visual spectrums. They ambush their prey from close range." "Excellent," Professor Vex said. The hologram shifted to show a sleek, cat-like creature materializing from what appeared to be empty air. "What about the pack hunters of Zentari?" "Prime." Kaax straightened in his seat, pride evident in his posture. My people hunt in coordinated groups. We use strength and teamwork to bring down prey much larger than ourselves. The strongest leads the hunt, and the pack follows. Very good, the professor nodded. The display showed a group of Zentari warriors working together to corner a massive an elephant-like creature. Now what about the Keth hunting methods? Zara's ears perked up. We use speed and endurance. Can run for hours without stopping, wearing down our prey until they collapse from exhaustion. Interesting, Professor Vex said. Though I should note that true persistence hunting is quite rare in the galaxy. Most predators rely on short bursts of speed or ambush tactics. The hologram continued, showing various hunting techniques. The Hiveborn's coordinated swarm attacks. The void-touched use of technology to track and corner prey. And the aerial hunting methods of the wing-capable species. Finally, Professor Vex turned to Jake. And what about humans, Jake? What hunting methods do your people use? Jake looked up from his notes, seeming to consider the question carefully. Well, he said slowly, mostly we just run. The classroom erupted in laughter. Even the normally serious Lynn cracked a smile. Zara's high-pitched giggle mixed with Krex's booming, chuckles and the clicking sounds that passed for laughter among the Hiveborn. Run? Krex managed to say between laughs. You mean run away? Jake shook his head, his expression remaining calm and serious. No, we run after our prey. Follow them until they can't run anymore. Then we walk up to them and finish the job. Laughter gradually died down as students realized Jake wasn't joking. His tone remained matter-of-fact, as if he were describing the most normal thing in the world. Zix's compound eyes focused on Jake with new interest. You mean persistence hunting, like the professor mentioned? I guess so, Jake said. My ancestors used to hunt animals much bigger and faster than themselves. Horses, antelopes, deer. They would just follow them for hours, sometimes days, until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. Professor Vex's eyes widened. His species had studied persistence hunting as a theoretical concept, but he had never met anyone who actually practiced it. How long could your ancestors maintain pursuit? Jake scratched his head, thinking. Depends on the conditions and the prey. But humans have run ultramarathons over 100 miles long. Some of our best runners can keep going for over 24 hours straight. The classroom fell silent. Even by galactic standards, that kind of endurance was remarkable. Most predator species relied on quick strikes and short chases. The idea of maintaining pursuit for an entire day seemed impossible. But surely that's just athletic achievement, Lynn said, her analytical mind trying to process this information. Modern humans don't actually hunt this way anymore, do they? Jake nodded. Not most of us, no. We have technology and agriculture now. But some groups still do it. There are tribes in Africa and South America that still hunt the old way, and humans do endurance sports for fun. Marathon running, ultra-marathons, Ironman competitions. For fun? Zara squeaked. The idea of running until exhaustion as entertainment seemed bizarre to her people who valued their speed but used it in short bursts. Yeah, Jake said with a small smile. Some humans think it's relaxing. Professor Vex stared at Jake for a long moment, then at his notes, then back at Jake. In all his years of teaching, he had never encountered a species that treated extreme endurance as recreational activity. Perhaps the professor said slowly, we should move this lesson to the simulation chambers. I think a practical demonstration would be ... educational. The students murmured excitedly among themselves as they prepared to leave the classroom. Most were curious to see what this quiet human could actually do. Others, particularly Krix, seemed eager to prove that their own hunting methods were superior. Jake simply closed his notebook and stood up, stretching casually. He had no idea that his simple explanation had just challenged everything these students thought they knew about predators and prey. To him, he was just describing basic human capabilities. As they walked toward the simulation chambers, Zara found herself walking beside Jake. Is it really true? She asked quietly, about the running. Jake looked down at the small, furry student and nodded. Want to see? The simulation chamber was the size of a small stadium, its walls lined with advanced holographic projectors that could create any environment imaginable. Professor Vex led the class inside, his forearms working quickly on the control panel, while his other two gestured for the students to gather around. "Today, we will test hunting skills in a practical setting," he announced. "I am programming a forest environment with a single target creature. Your job is to track and subdue the target using only basic equipment." The chamber filled with light and color as the holographic forest materialized around them. Tall trees stretched up toward an artificial sky, their leaves rustling in a gentle breeze that felt completely real. The sound of birds and insects filled the air, and the scent of pine and earth made several students take deep breaths. "What kind of creature are we hunting?" asked Lynn, already pulling out her scanning device to analyze the environment. "Professor?" Vex smiled. "Kaax beast from the jungle world of Mordock's Prime. They are known for their incredible speed, aggressive nature, and cunning intelligence. They can reach speeds of up to 60 miles per hour and have been known to set traps for their pursuers." Kaax cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing through the forest. Finally, a real challenge. "My people have legends about the Kaax. They say only the greatest warriors can face them. The beast has been released somewhere in this 50-square-mile forest," Professor Vex continued. "You each get one attempt. Exercise ends when you either capture the creature or give up. Standard Academy rules apply. No weapons that could cause permanent harm, no technology above level 3 complexity." Zix raised one of her forearms. "How will we know if we have succeeded?" "Place this tracking marker on the creature." Professor Vex held up a small silver disc. "The simulation will register success and end the exercise." Several students volunteered to go first, eager to show their skills. Kaax stepped forward immediately, his massive frame casting a shadow over the smaller students. "I will show you how Zentari warriors hunt," he declared, taking the tracking marker from Professor Vex. The professor activated his timer. "Begin when ready." Kaax let out a loud roar that echoed through the forest, then charged forward into the underbrush. His powerful legs carried him quickly between the trees, and his keen nose searched for the scent of his prey. The other students followed his progress on the chamber's viewing screens. For the first few minutes, Kaax made good progress. His warrior training showed as he moved efficiently through the forest, reading tracks and following scent trails. Then he found what he was looking for, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a tiger and a bear. With electric blue stripes running along its muscular body, the Kaax beast saw Kaax coming and immediately ran. The creature moved like lightning, weaving between trees and leaping over fallen logs with impossible grace. Kaax pursued with determination, his powerful muscles propelling him forward as he tried to match the beast's speed. The chase lasted for 20 minutes before Kaax finally stopped. Breathing heavily, the beast had simply outmaneuvered him, using the thick forest to break line of sight and disappear completely. "Impressive effort," Professor Vex said as Kaax returned to the group, but the Kaax's speed advantage proved too much. Lynn stepped forward next, her scanning equipment already humming with activity. "I will use a more scientific approach," she announced. She began by analyzing the environment systematically, taking readings of air currents, soil composition, and local wildlife patterns. Her technology allowed her to create a detailed map of the forest and predict the most likely areas where the beast might hide. Lynn's hunt was methodical and careful. She followed logical search patterns and used her sensors to track the creature's movements. When she finally located the Kaax beast, she attempted to use sonic disruptors to confuse it while she approached, but the beast was smarter than her calculations had predicted. It deliberately triggered her sensors with false readings, leading her in circles through the forest. After an hour of frustration, Lynn finally gave up. Her equipment overheated, and her logical mind unable to predict the creature's chaotic behavior. Technology has its limits when facing unpredictable opponents. Professor Vex observed Zara volunteered next, her small size allowing her to move quickly through the undergrowth. She used her natural speed and agility to great advantage, able To follow the beast's trail were larger students, would have been blocked by thick vegetation. The Keth student's attempt was the most exciting to watch. She managed to keep pace with the Kaax beast for quite some time, her quick reflexes allowing her to dodge its attempts to lose her in the maze of branches and rocks. But eventually, even Zara's impressive endurance reached its limit. The creature's raw speed was simply too much for her, and she had to stop to catch her breath. By the time she recovered, the beast had vanished once again. "Excellent effort," Professor Vex said, as Zara returned, panting but proud of her performance. "You came closer than anyone else so far." Ooh. 3 more students attempted the challenge, each using their species' natural advantages. The flying student tried to track from above but lost the creature in the thick forest canopy. The tunneling student attempted to trap the beast by digging pitfalls, but couldn't predict its movement patterns accurately enough. The camouflaged student got close by hiding and waiting, but the beast's keen senses detected him before he could make his move. Finally, it was Jake's turn. Several students had lost interest by now, assuming the human would fail just as spectacularly as everyone else. Some were even placing quiet bets on how quickly he would give up. Jake took the tracking marker from Professor Vex and looked around the forest thoughtfully. Not like the others, he didn't immediately charge into action or pull out any equipment. Instead, he knelt down and examined the ground carefully, looking at the tracks left by previous attempts. "The beast has been running for hours now," he said quietly. "It must be getting tired." Professor Vex raised an eyebrow. "The Kaax beast has tremendous endurance. It can maintain top speed for much longer than most creatures." Jake nodded but didn't seem concerned. "Everything gets tired eventually." He stood up and began walking into the forest at what seemed like an impossibly slow pace. While other students had sprinted or used technology to search quickly, Jake simply walked forward with steady, measured steps. "Is he even trying?" Kaax muttered, watching the display screen show Jake's leisurely progress. But Professor Vex was watching with growing interest. Humans' movements were deliberate and purposeful. He wasn't just wandering aimlessly. He was following a trail that others had missed entirely. Jake moved through the forest like he belonged there. He stepped over fallen logs without breaking stride, ducked under low branches automatically, and navigated the rough terrain with surprising grace. Most importantly, he never stopped moving. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2 hours. Other students began to lose attention, some even falling asleep in their chairs. But Jake continued his steady pursuit, following tracks that seemed invisible to everyone else. How is he still following it? Lynn whispered, studying her instruments. "My sensors show the trail went cold over an hour ago." Professor Vex was leaning forward in his chair now, completely focused on Jake's progress. He's not following technological traces, the professor realized. He's reading the environment itself. Jake paused occasionally to examine broken twigs, disturbed leaves, or barely visible prints in the soft earth. He seemed to understand the forest in a way that transcended mere tracking. He was predicting where the creature would go based on the terrain and its behavior patterns. 3 hours into the exercise, something changed on the display. The beast, which had been moving at incredible speeds throughout all the previous attempts, was starting to slow down. Its powerful legs were beginning to falter, and its breathing was becoming labored. "Impossible," Kaax breathed, staring at the screen. "The beast should have infinite energy in the simulation." "The simulation is designed to be realistic," Professor Vex explained, his voice filled with amazement. "The creature experiences fatigue, just like a real animal would. But no one has ever pursued it long enough to see this happen," Jake continued, his relentless advance never changing his pace. When the beast tried to hide, he found it. When it attempted to double back on its trail, he anticipated the move. When it tried to use the difficult terrain to lose him, he navigated the obstacles, as if he had walked these paths his entire life. For hours in, the Kaax beast was clearly struggling. It could no longer maintain its incredible speed and was making mistakes in its escape attempts. Jake, meanwhile, showed no signs of slowing down. His breathing remained steady, his pace unchanged. "He's still not even breathing hard," Zara observed. With wonder, finally, after 4.5 hours, the inevitable happened. The Kaax beast, exhausted beyond its ability to continue, collapsed beside a small stream. It lay there, panting, its powerful muscles trembling with fatigue. Jake appeared through the trees a few minutes later, walking at the same steady pace he had maintained throughout the entire pursuit. He approached the exhausted creature calmly and placed the tracking marker on its flank. The simulation ended, and the forest dissolved around them, leaving only the empty chamber. News of Jake's achievement spread through the academy like wildfire. By the next morning, every student and instructor on the station had heard about the human who completed the impossible Kaax hunt. Jake found himself the center of attention. Wherever he went, though he seemed genuinely confused by all the fuss, "It really wasn't that hard," he told Zara as they walked to their next class together. The small Keth scout had become fascinated with Jake after witnessing his hunting demonstration. The creature got tired eventually. Everything does. Zara's large ears twitched with curiosity. "But how did you know it would get tired?" "Our instructors always told us the Kaax beast had unlimited endurance." Jake scratched his head, thinking about how to explain something that seemed obvious to him. Nothing has unlimited endurance. It's just not how bodies work. The bigger and faster something is, the more energy it uses. Eventually that energy runs out. This simple statement would have profound implications that Jake couldn't have imagined. Within hours, instructors throughout the academy were designing new tests specifically to understand human capabilities. Combat instructor Nash, a grizzled veteran from the warrior planet Corton, decided to test Jake's fighting abilities. He set up a series of combat simulations, each designed to push students to their limits in different ways. "Today we will test reaction time, tactical thinking, and combat endurance," Instructor Nash announced to the assembled class. "Martinez, you will face multiple opponents in succession." The first opponent was a holographic Zentari warrior, programmed with all the strength and aggression of Kaax's people. Jake faced the towering figure in the combat ring, looking small and insignificant by comparison. The holographic warrior charged forward with a roar, expecting Jake to either flee or meet force with force. Instead, Jake did something unexpected. He stepped aside at the last possible moment, letting the warrior's momentum carry him past. As the confused hologram turned around, Jake was already moving again, staying just out of reach. The other students watched in amazement as Jake continued this pattern. He never tried to overpower his opponent or match his strength. Instead, he used the warrior's own aggression against him, letting the hologram exhaust itself with powerful but ineffective attacks. After 10 minutes, the holographic warrior was breathing heavily and moving more slowly. Jake seized the moment, moving in quickly to tap the warrior with his training weapon before dancing away again. "Victory to Martinez," Instructor Nash announced, his voice betraying his surprise. The next opponent was a swift Keth scout, programmed to match Zara's people's incredible speed. This time, Jake faced an opponent who could move faster than his eyes could follow. But again, Jake refused to play by the expected rules. Instead of trying to match the scout's speed, he focused on predicting where the opponent would be. He watched 4 patterns in the movement, studying the hologram's preferred attack angles and escape routes. When Jake finally moved to attack, it wasn't with blazing speed, but with perfect timing. He positioned himself exactly where the scout would be in the next moment, scoring a clean hit while the hologram was still moving. The third opponent was a void-touched analyst, programmed to use advanced technology and tactical planning. Jake faced an opponent who could calculate thousands of possible moves in seconds and adapt to any strategy. This time, Jake's approach was even more puzzling to the watching students. He seemed to ignore tactical considerations entirely, making moves that appeared random and illogical. The holographic analysts advanced calculations couldn't predict actions that didn't follow any recognizable pattern. Jake's seemingly chaotic Fighting style frustrated the analytical opponent until it began making mistakes, trying to find logic where none existed. When the hologram finally overextended itself trying to counter an attack that never came, Jake was there to end the match. How? Lynn asked after the exercise ended. Her analytical mind was struggling to understand what she had witnessed. Your tactics made no sense. There was no logical pattern to your movements. Jake shrugged. Sometimes the best strategy is to not have a strategy. If your opponent can't predict what you're doing, they can't counter it effectively. Instructor Nash looked at Jake with new respect. Where did you learn these techniques?
I took some
Martial arts classes back home, Jake replied casually. And I played a lot of sports in school. Team sports teach you to read other players and think on your feet. The instructor made notes on his tablet, muttering something about updating the combat curriculum later that week. Jake faced his biggest challenge yet in survival training class. Instructor Wells, a tough woman from the desert world of Kepler, had designed what she called the ultimate survival scenario. You will be placed in a simulation of the harshest environment known to galactic civilization, she announced. The desert moon of Zarion, where temperatures reach 150 degrees during the day and drop to -40 at night. You have minimal equipment and must survive for 48 hours. Other students had attempted this simulation before, the record survival time was 6 hours, achieved by a specially adapted desert species. Most students lasted less than 2 hours before the extreme conditions forced them to quit. Jake entered the simulation chamber as it transformed into a hellish landscape of burning sand and jagged rocks. The artificial sun blazed overhead with punishing intensity, and the air shimmered with heat waves. While previous students had tried to find shelter and wait out the harsh conditions, Jake took a different approach. He began moving immediately, but not randomly. He seemed to understand something about desert survival that escaped the other students. Jake found water where others saw only barren sand, locating underground springs by reading the subtle signs. In the landscape, he constructed shelter from materials that other students had overlooked, using techniques that were simple but incredibly effective. When night fell and the temperature plummeted, Jake's shelter kept him warm while his improvised water collection system gathered moisture from the cold air. He even managed to catch and prepare small desert creatures for food. Using traps made from scraps and debris, the watching students were amazed. But Jake's casual attitude made it seem like he was on a camping trip rather than fighting for survival in one of the galaxy's most hostile environments. This is actually kind of relaxing, Jake mentioned to the monitoring system during his second day. Reminds me of a desert survival course I took in Arizona. When the 48-tower simulation ended, Jake emerged looking tired but healthy. He had not only survived but thrived in conditions that defeated every other student who had attempted the challenge. Word of Jake's performance reached Commander Hayes, the Academy's director. The stern Altarian officer called Jake to her office for what she described as a routine interview. But Jake could tell she was deeply concerned about something. Commander Hayes was an impressive figure, blue-tinged skin and silver hair that marked her as a member of one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Her people had been exploring space for thousands of years and considered themselves among the most sophisticated species in the galaxy. Please sit down, Martinez, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her massive desk. I want to ask you some questions about your homeworld. Jake sat down, feeling a bit nervous. He had never been called to the director's office before and wasn't sure what he had done wrong. Tell me about human military history, Commander Hayes began consulting, a tablet filled with information. Jake blinked in surprise. That's a pretty big topic. What specifically do you want to know? How long have humans been fighting wars? Jake thought about it. Well, pretty much since we started keeping records. Probably longer than that. Why? Commander Hayes' blue skin seemed to grow paler in these wars. They were against other humans. Yeah, mostly. Though we've had some conflicts with wildlife and natural disasters too. Humans have fought just about everything at some point. The commander's hands trembled slightly as she made notes. How many major wars has your species fought? Jake scratched his head. I'm not really a history expert, but... Hundreds. Be thousands if you count all the smaller conflicts. We've gotten better at talking things out instead of fighting, but we still have disagreements sometimes. Commander Hayes stared at Jake for a long moment. Her people had fought perhaps 3 major conflicts in their entire recorded history, and those were considered traumatic events that shaped their entire civilization. "What about your recreational activities?" she asked, changing the subject. Jake brightened up. "Oh, we do lots of fun stuff. Sports, hiking, camping, rock climbing, swimming, running marathons. Extreme sports like skydiving and bungee jumping, ... The commander's expression grew more concerned with each activity Jake mentioned. What humans considered entertainment, most galactic species would classify as military training or torture. "You jump from aircraft? ... For fun?" she asked weakly. "Sure, it's a rush. Some people do it without parachutes too, though. That's pretty dangerous." Commander Hayes had to sit down. Her species considered a 10-foot fall to be potentially fatal. The idea of deliberately jumping from aircraft was beyond her comprehension. "And you climb mountains?" "Yeah, mountain climbing is popular. Some people climb without ropes or safety equipment. They call it free climbing." 3 days after Commander Hayes sent her report to the Galactic Council, a sleek warship arrived at the Academy station. The ship bore the symbols of the Draconian Empire, and everyone knew what that meant. The Draconians were the most feared military force in the galaxy, a species bred for warfare and conquest. Jake was eating lunch with Zara when the announcement came over the station's communication system. "All students and faculty report to the main assembly hall immediately." Massive hall buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of students and instructors gathered. Jake noticed that even the normally confident Kaax looked worried. His yellow eyes fixed on the stage where Commander Hayes stood next to a figure that made everyone uncomfortable. "Commander, the Draconian Empire was everything the stories said Draconians were supposed to be." He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his dark red skin marked with ritual scars that told of countless battles. His forearms were crossed over his massive chest, and his black eyes surveyed the assembled crowd, like a predator choosing prey. "Students of the Galactic Military Academy," Commander Hayes began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "We have been honored with a visit from Commander Thane of the Draconian War College. He has come to propose a joint training exercise." "Commander." Thane stepped forward, his heavy footsteps echoing in the silent hall. When he spoke, his voice was deep and commanding. "We have heard interesting reports about this Academy's recent ... achievements. My superiors find these reports difficult to believe." Jake felt every eye in the hall turn toward him, slouched lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear. "Therefore," Commander Thane continued, "we propose a challenge. Joint survival and combat exercise between our finest graduates and your best students. 1 week on the hostile moon Kepler 9, the winning team will prove which academy truly produces superior warriors." The hall erupted in excited whispers. A challenge from the Draconians was both an honor and a terrifying prospect. Their military college was legendary throughout the galaxy, producing some of the most feared warriors in known space. Commander Hayes looked out over the crowd. "We accept your challenge, Commander Thane. Our teams will be selected by the end of the day." As the assembly broke up, Jake tried to blend into the crowd and escape quietly. But Professor Vex caught up with him before he could reach the door. "Martinez," the professor said, placing one of his 6 hands on Jake's shoulder, "you will be leading one of our teams." Jake's eyes widened. "Me, but I'm just an exchange student. Shouldn't Kaax or Lynn lead a team? They know way more about military tactics than I do." Perhaps Professor Vex smiled. "But you have something they don't. You have shown us that victory doesn't always come from superior firepower or advanced technology." By evening, the teams were selected. Jake found himself assigned to Team Alpha, along with 3 other students. Rex was a young Zentari warrior, smaller than Kaax, but equally proud and aggressive. Maya was a void-touched analyst whose logical mind complemented her people's advanced technology. Zara was the Keth scout whose speed and agility had impressed everyone except Jake during the Kaax hunt. The 4 of them met in a conference room to discuss strategy. Rex immediately took charge, his warrior instincts making him assume leadership. "We need to be aggressive," Rex declared, pounding his fist on the table. Hit the Draconians hard and fast before they can organize their defenses. Maya shook her head, pulling up holographic displays of Kepler-9's surface. The data suggests a more cautious approach. We should use superior technology and analytical thinking to outmaneuver them. Zara's ears twitched nervously. Maybe we should focus on speed and mobility. Hit-and-run tactics. Jake listened to his teammates argue for nearly an hour before finally speaking up. What if we don't try to beat them at their own game? Itters stopped arguing and looked at him. Jake continued. Everyone expects us to either charge in like warriors, or use fancy technology, or run around really fast. What if we do something completely different? Rex frowned. Like what? Like survive, Jake said simply. This is supposed to be a survival exercise, right? What if we focus on actually surviving instead of fighting? Maya's analytical mind began processing this idea. You're suggesting we avoid direct confrontation entirely? Not entirely, Jake said, but we don't have to fight them on their terms. We can make them fight on ours. Rex looked confused. What are our terms? You're not a warrior, Maya thinks too much. Zara runs away from everything. And I'm too small to fight real Draconian graduates. Jake smiled. Our terms are simple. We don't give up. The next morning, both teams were transported to Kepler-9. A barren moon with extreme weather conditions, dangerous terrain, automated defense systems scattered across its surface. The challenge was straightforward. Complete a series of objectives. While surviving the hostile environment and competing against the opposing team, the Draconian team consisted of 4 graduates from their war college, each one a specialist in different aspects of combat and survival. They're bigger, stronger, and more experienced than Jake's team. More importantly, they had trained together for years and moved with the coordinated precision of a military unit. As soon as both teams were dropped on the moon's surface, the Draconians immediately began implementing their strategy. They moved with military efficiency toward the first objective, using superior firepower and disciplined tactics to overcome the automated defenses. Jake's team, meanwhile, seemed to be struggling. Rex wanted to charge directly at the objectives. Maya was overwhelmed by the amount of data she needed to process, and Zara kept jumping at every sound the hostile environment made. This is hopeless, Rex muttered as they watched the Draconians' progress on their tracking displays. They're already halfway to the second objective while we're still arguing about which way to go. Jake knelt down and began studying the terrain. Map more carefully. They're moving fast, but they're also using a lot of energy. Look at their path. They're taking the most direct routes and fighting through every obstacle. So, Maya asked, they're winning? Are they? Jake pointed to the environmental readings. The moon's weather patterns show a major storm system moving in. Temperature drops, electromagnetic interference, limited visibility. How well do you think their high-tech equipment will work in those conditions? Maya's eyes widened as she began. Calculating the implications, their advanced targeting systems will be compromised. Their communication equipment will be unreliable, and their heavy armor and weapons will slow them down when they need to move quickly, Zara added, beginning to understand Jake's thinking. Rex still looked skeptical. So what do we do? Wait for the storm and hope they make mistakes. His head, we adapt. Maya, can you modify our equipment to work in electromagnetic interference? It will require shutting down most of our advanced systems, Maya replied. We'll be operating with basic equipment only, good, Jake said. Zara, you know this terrain better than anyone after studying the maps. Can you find routes that avoid the automated defenses? Zara's ears perked up with confidence. They're natural paths through the canyon systems. They're longer, but much safer. Perfect, Jake said. And Rex, I need you to think like a hunter, not a warrior. We're not trying to overpower them, we're trying to outlast them. As the storm system approached, Jake's team began implementing their new strategy. They moved slowly and carefully, avoiding the automated defenses rather than fighting through them. When the electromagnetic storm hit, they were already in sheltered positions, while the Draconians found themselves caught in the open. The storm lasted 6 hours, during which The Draconian team's advanced equipment malfunctioned repeatedly. Their communication was cut off, their targeting systems failed, and their heavy armor became a liability in the harsh conditions. Jake's team, meanwhile, weathered the storm in natural shelters Zara had found. They used the time to rest, plan their next moves, and wait for the perfect moment to advance. When the storm finally passed, the situation had changed dramatically. The Draconian team was exhausted from fighting the weather and dealing with equipment failures. They had used most of their energy reserves and were struggling with damaged gear. Jake's team emerged from their shelters, refreshed and ready to move. They began systematically visiting the objectives. Using the routes Zara had mapped out to avoid detection and conserve energy. By the third day, a pattern had emerged. The Draconians would reach objectives first, using their superior firepower and tactics, but they were burning through their resources at an unsustainable rate. Jake's team moved more slowly, but arrived at each location with full energy reserves and undamaged equipment. "They're wearing themselves out," Maya observed, watching the Draconian teams progress. "Their efficiency is dropping with each objective."
Kaax
Was beginning to understand Jake's strategy. "We're not trying to beat them in individual battles. We're trying to win the war." "Exactly," Jake said. "This isn't about who's stronger or faster. It's about who can keep going when everyone else gives up." On the fourth day, the Draconian team made their first major mistake. Exhausted and frustrated by Jake's team's persistent presence, they decided to set an ambush at the next objective. But Jake had anticipated this move. The victory celebration in the Academy's main hall was unlike anything the station had ever seen. Students from dozens of different worlds cheered and congratulated Jake's team, while the instructors looked on with expressions ranging from amazement to deep concern. Commander Thane stood at the edge of the crowd, his forearms crossed and his dark eyes fixed on Jake. The massive Draconian warrior had barely spoken since his team's defeat, and everyone could see that his pride had taken a serious blow. Jake noticed the commander's stare and felt uncomfortable. With all the attention, he tried to slip away from the celebration, but Commander Thane's booming voice stopped him. "Human," the Draconian called out, causing the entire hall to fall silent. "I demand an explanation." Jake turned around slowly, aware that everyone was watching. "An explanation for what, sir?" Commander Thane stepped forward, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. "My graduates are the finest warriors in the galaxy. They have trained since childhood in the arts of war. They have defeated enemies that would terrify most species. How did you and your team of misfits defeat them?" The word misfits caused Rex to growl softly, while Maya's analytical mind began calculating the odds of surviving a direct confrontation with an angry Draconian commander. Zara's ears flattened against her head. She moved closer to Jake for protection. Jake looked around the hall at all the faces staring at him. He saw curiosity, fear, respect, and confusion in the eyes of his fellow students. Finally, he looked back at Commander Thane. "With respect, sir," Jake said quietly, "I think you're asking the wrong question." Commander Thane's scarred face darkened with anger. "Explain." "What?" Jake took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would be heard by every student and instructor. "In the Academy, you're asking how we beat your warriors. But the real question is, what kind of war were we fighting?" The commander's eyes narrowed. It was a military exercise, a test of combat skills and tactical thinking. "No, sir," Jake shook his head. "It was a survival exercise. Your team was fighting a war. My team was trying to survive one." Professor Vex leaned forward, his 6 arms folding with interest. "Explain the difference, Martinez." Jake looked around the room, trying to find the right words. "When you fight a war, you're trying to defeat your enemy as quickly and decisively as possible. You use superior firepower, better tactics, advanced technology. You win by being stronger, faster, smarter than your opponent." Commander Thane nodded grimly. "That is the Draconian way. Victory through strength. But when you're trying to survive," Jake continued, "winning and losing don't matter as much as still being alive at the end. You don't have to be the strongest or the fastest. You just have to outlast whatever is trying to kill you. Remain silent as students and instructors process this idea. For most galactic species, warfare was about quick, decisive victories. The concept of winning through endurance was foreign to them. Your people learned to fight wars, Jake said, looking directly at Commander Thane. My people learned to survive. Them. Commander Hayes stepped forward from where she had been observing the conversation. What do you mean by that, Martinez? Jake scratched his head, trying to organize his thoughts. Well, humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years, but we've also been fighting everything else. Wild animals, diseases, natural disasters, ice ages, droughts, floods. We learned that sometimes you can't win a fight, but you can survive it. He gestured to his teammates. Rex thought he had to be the strongest warrior. Maya thought she needed the best technology. Zara thought she had to be the fastest scout. But none of those things mattered as much as just not giving up. Rex stepped forward, his yellow eyes glowing with newfound understanding. The human taught us that persistence is more powerful than strength. Maya nodded, her analytical mind finally grasping the concept. We calculated probability of success based on firepower and tactics. But we never factored in the variable of refusing to quit. Ears perked up with confidence. We learned that being scared is okay, as long as you keep moving forward anyway. Commander Thane stared at the 4 team members for a long moment. You are saying that humans win by not losing? Jake smiled. We win by still being there when everyone else has given up. It's not very exciting, but it works. But surely, Commander Thane protested. Superior warriors with better training and equipment should defeat such tactics. Professor Vex had been taking notes throughout the conversation. Commander, may I share some information about human history that might be relevant?
Ow.
At Commander Thane's nod, the professor activated a holographic display. I have been researching human military conflicts since Martinez arrived at our academy. The patterns are ... illuminating. The display showed a timeline of human history, marked with countless conflicts and wars. Humans have been fighting continuously for over 10,000 years. Not occasional conflicts like most species, but constant warfare somewhere on there. Planet. Commander Thane's eyes widened as he saw the scope of human military history. Impossible. No species could survive that level of conflict. Furthermore, Professor Vex continued, humans regularly fight enemies with superior technology, numbers, or resources. And they often win through tactics similar to what Martinez demonstrated: attrition, persistence, and adaptation. The display showed examples: small human forces defeating larger armies, resistance movements outlasting occupying forces, civilizations surviving disasters that destroyed their enemies. Most remarkably, Professor Vex said, humans treat extreme endurance as recreational activity. They voluntarily subject themselves to physical challenges that most species would consider torture. Commander Hayes added her own research to the display. Human athletes regularly push their bodies beyond what we considered biologically possible. They climb mountains without equipment, swim in freezing water, run distances that would kill most galactic citizens. And they do this for fun, Jake added helpfully. My sister runs marathons on weekends. My dad climbs mountains as a hobby. Commander? Thane was staring at the holographic display with growing alarm. Your entire species is composed of warriors. Jake shook his head. Not warriors. Survivors. There's a difference. What difference? Commander Thane demanded. Jake thought about how to explain something that seemed obvious to him. Warriors fight to win. Survivors fight to keep living. Warriors want victory. Survivors want to see tomorrow. He gestured to the display showing human history. My ancestors survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years. They survived diseases. That killed most of the population. They survived wars, famines, natural disasters, and predators that were bigger and stronger than they were. How? The question came from Lynn, the void-touched student who had been listening intently. They adapted, Jake said simply. When the environment changed, they changed with it. When enemies developed new weapons, they developed new tactics. When traditional methods failed, they tried something else. Commander Thane was beginning to understand something that disturbed him deeply. You are saying that humans are not just another warrior species. You are something else entirely. Jake nodded. We're the species that turned a death world into a garden and never forgot how to be dangerous when we needed to be. The implications of this statement rippled through the assembled crowd. Every student and instructor began to reassess their understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. But you seem so normal, Zara said, confusion clear in her voice. You're friendly and helpful, and you worry about passing your exams? Jake laughed. I am normal. That's the point. Every human carries the genetic memory of ancestors who survived. The impossible. We don't think of ourselves as special because this is just normal for us. Commander Hayes was making rapid notes on her tablet. This explains why human recreational activities seem so extreme to other species. What we consider impossible challenges, humans consider entertainment. Exactly, Jake said. We climb mountains because it's fun. We run ultramarathons because it feels good. We explore dangerous places because we're curious. We don't do these things because we're warriors. Do them because we're human. Commander Thane stood silently for several minutes, processing everything he had learned. Finally, he spoke in a voice that was much quieter than his usual commanding tone. I came here to prove Draconian superiority, he admitted. I expected to find primitive Deathworlders who could be easily defeated through superior training and equipment. He looked directly at Jake. Instead, I found something that makes me reconsider everything I thought I knew about warfare. What's that, sir? Jake asked. I found a species that has spent 10,000 years learning how to survive anything the universe could throw at them. And you do it with such casual competence that you don't even realize how terrifying that is. To the rest of us, the hall remained silent, as everyone absorbed the weight of this revelation. Jake looked around at his fellow students and saw a mixture of awe and fear in their eyes. Look, Jake said, trying to lighten the mood. I'm really not that scary. I just want to pass my classes and maybe find a decent burger somewhere on this station. Commander Thane actually smiled at that, an expression that looked strange on his scarred face. Martinez, you have taught me more about warfare in 1 week.